Welcome back everyone to another video. Please like, subscribe, and share this video with friends of yours who may find it interesting. Today, we're going back to Japan, to 1987 to be specific, where Japanese company Square was quickly going bankrupt, following a series of failed releases for the Famicom system. Between 1986 and 1987, Square had released 6 different games for the Famicom system, all of which you've probably never heard of, such as Deep Dungeon, Appletown Story, and Cleopatra no Maho, all of which were Japanese only and never made it to the West. While Square was absolutely pumping out games, they were only of mediocre quality, receiving poor critical reception and selling very few copies on the already saturated Famicom market. Square, and their contract to develop games for Nintendo, was on the ropes. At the time, Square was being pulled in all different directions. Some of the developers of the company wanted to continue making games, to keep trying, while others viewed Square as a software company first, and wanted to return to commercial development. Square realized they had to hit it out of the park this time. They had to succeed if they were to continue making games. They started by hiring fresh college graduate, 21-year-old Hironobu Sakaguchi, to lead the development effort on this new project. Sakaguchi quickly melded into Square's dev team and began to look outside of the company to find help for this Hail Mary of a game. He recruited Yoshitaka Amano, an upstart artist who is known for his fantasy drawings and illustration of the manga Vampire Hunter D, a now famous work in manga history. Amano would also illustrate the animated movie of Vampire Hunter D, one of the first anime movies in Japan. Sakaguchi then reached out to Nobuo Uematsu, a composer who has written the soundtrack of a number of Square's earlier games. Uematsu's music was quite well liked in the Square office, and fans of Square especially had made frequent positive comments about his music. Here, just take a listen to some of his earlier works. Pretty catchy, right? With a crack team assembled, Sakaguchi and co. set out planning their swan song. Just earlier in the year, Square's rival company, another Nintendo contractor called Enix, had released Dragon Quest, a massive critical and sales success. Dragon Quest was beloved for its story, turn-based combat, catchy music, and adventure themes, something Sakaguchi hoped to emulate within his own game. So it was decided, Square would make one last game, and a fantasy game at that. As this would likely be their final game, it was dubbed Final Fantasy. A fitting name to send off Square with. Square, with their backs against the wall, got to work pulling out all the stops. Just a year prior, Square had made their first attempt at an RPG in Cruise Chaser Blasty, a Gundam, Doom, turn-based RPG amalgamation that looked nice, but was quite shallow with simplistic combat systems and very little variety in enemies. Leaning on their software dev experience and what they had learned from Cruise Chaser, Sakaguchi managed to streamline graphics processing and get the most out of the Famicom's 8-bit system, allowing for more detailed art for the game, something that would prove to be revolutionary in the field. Just take a look at this clip of Final Fantasy compared to other games from the time. This incredible artwork, alongside Uematsu's beautiful score, managed to take this game to new heights. Gone was the simple combat and few enemies of Cruise Chaser. Gone was its narrow halls and bland textures. Sakaguchi had crafted a living, breathing world for gamers to explore and live in. Square took Dragon Quest's revolutionary character-driven storyline idea and ran with it, giving each character purpose, reason, thoughts, and feelings by expanding upon it. While Dragon Quest I comes in at about 8 hours, Final Fantasy would take nearly double that at 15. To compensate for this, Final Fantasy, like Dragon Quest, would also allow saving, something that wasn't super common at this point in gaming. RPGs were still a really new genre, especially so to video games. Dungeons & Dragons had only been made about a decade ago, so the genre hadn't yet come into its own. Square was truly flying blind here. One very important question was, how was Square going to handle a new combat system? The man tasked with designing this new system was Hiroyuki Ito. Ito had never played an RPG before and was at a bit of a loss for what to do. One day, he took a break from work and by chance caught an American football game on TV. The playstyle inspired him. There was an attacker, a defender, taking turns and planning out their plays, each trying to get the upper hand on the other. This would become the basis for Final Fantasy combat. Not Dungeons & Dragons, not Dragon Quest, not The Legend of Zelda, American football. By combining industry-changing graphics, incredible music, and a robust combat system into a living, breathing world with memorable characters, Square had a real hit on their hands. On December 18th, 1987, Final Fantasy would take Japan by storm, receiving near universal praise from critics and fans alike. Square would ship some 520,000 copies for the NES in Japan, followed by another 600,000 on the Famicom and MSX system, totaling somewhere around 1.1 million copies sold just in Japan. Just behind the explosive Dragon Quest, who was sure to become an RPG legend alongside The Legend of Zelda, which had only released a year earlier. Square's celebration of their success would be short-lived though, as they would quickly get to work on bumping out a sequel. Meanwhile, Nintendo localization teams worked quickly to get Final Fantasy released in the West just 3 years later, where it would go on to sell 700,000 copies in America, beating out Dragon Quest. So they did it. Square had survived. This would not be their Final Fantasy, far from it. Final Fantasy had managed to breathe new life, and more importantly, new money, into the company, revitalizing it and giving them a clear direction. They would be a game company from now on. Square would go on to make fantasy worlds for gamers to explore, live in, and occasionally save. Thank you all for watching. This has been the story of how one company's Hail Mary would change gaming forever. If you enjoyed this story, please like, subscribe, and share it with your friends. Let me know what you think below, and I'll see you next time.